If you lost everything material in your life right now, your home, your clothes, your bank accounts, everything material, what would be the first thing you'd do?
What does accountable mean to you?
I believe accountability is something you do for someone. It's not something you do to someone. Execution's the name of the game. It's not what we talk about, it's what we actually do.
You pay for the person to show up for you daily when you need them.
The hardest mindset shift I've ever made was going from
This is Elemental Conversations, where leadership isn't just talked about, it's tested. I'm Tyler, your host, helping you lead with your values, push through adversity, roll with change, and make bold decisions. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and if you're ready to challenge the status quo, then get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Como.
How much of your journey would you say was luck versus skill?
The reason I pause before I answer that is I realize that every single word in the English language, which is the only language I speak, has an emotional connotation to it, that not everyone interprets and perceives words the exact same way. Whereas you and I may hear the same word, and even though we know the technical definition of it, we have different feelings of what that word makes us feel. And the reason I'm saying that to preface, luck is always an interesting one. I believe way more in cause and effect than luck. So for me, I tend to use the word fortunate. I have been unbelievably fortunate in so many capacities of my life to have been afforded so many different opportunities, people that have poured into me, people that have opened doors for me, people that have taught me and challenged me and pushed me, where some people might say that I was lucky to be in those situations and have those relationships and have those experiences, but I tend to use the word fortunate. So I don't really place a whole lot of value on the word luck or consider where I am in life at present being the result of luck. I look at it more as being very fortunate to have been afforded some opportunities. But then also to the other part of your question, I've worked really hard on developing some fundamental skill sets that I believe have high utility and would help someone be successful and fulfilled and high performing in really any area of life.
Talking about fortunate to be pushed by some people, motivated by some people, who's been your biggest influence?
That's another one that's pretty challenging. We could do an entire 4-hour segment just on all of the people that I would love to be able to give credit to. You know, it certainly started with my family. My parents were incredibly supportive in, wanting to see me do things that I enjoyed and doing things that I loved, which for me, 99% of the time it involved sport or some type of physical activity. But my parents were both elementary educators. My mom was a first grade teacher and my father was a teacher and then a principal. So I also had modeled at a very early age for me two people that loved what they did for a living and felt a sense of contribution. They found meaning and purpose in their work, but they also felt like they were giving back and doing something for the greater good. And I think those have always been the foundation of what I've tried to do. And then each stepping stone along the way, I've had coaches and mentors and colleagues and friends and business partners that have done the same, that have championed me and pushed me and encouraged me, but at the same time held me accountable. So yeah, it's a pretty long list, but I'll go ahead and just start with my parents.
I appreciate the end of that where you said, held me accountable. And earlier you had said, everybody interprets their own words in a different definition. What does accountable mean to you?
I believe accountability is something you do for someone. It's not something you do to someone. A lot of people hear the word accountability and immediately think punishment, think someone's watching me do what I do so they can catch me doing something wrong. I believe accountability is just holding someone to an incredibly high standard of excellence. And we should want to surround ourselves and insulate ourselves with people that hold us to a very high standard. Now, I will readily acknowledge that many times when you're on the receiving end of some accountability, in the moment, it doesn't feel like a gift. in the moment, it doesn't feel like something someone is doing for you, because we're always trying to protect our egos. And we're always on some level trying to defend our ego and defend who we believe we are. But really, accountability is about showing someone you care. Showing someone you care so much about them that you want to hold them to the highest standard of excellence. So I really believe accountability is the best gift you can give another human being. That's true for me as a father, holding my children accountable. That's true for me in business, holding my colleagues and my teammates and my partners accountable. I believe that's true in a relationship, holding your spouse or significant other accountable, to a high standard of excellence. So I view accountability in a very positive light.
What's the most important things that our audience needs to know about you to understand your story here?
I'm a big believer in the basics, and I'm a big believer in fundamentals. I believe that, as you can see from the neon sign above my head, in simplifying success. I think so many areas of life, so many areas of business, so many areas of relationships, so many areas of performance are already inherently complex, so we don't need to make them any harder than they need to be. I'm also a believer that complexity undermines execution. And in each of those areas I just mentioned, whether we're talking about business or sport or relationships or parenting, execution's the name of the game. It's not what we talk about, it's what we actually do. It's what we put into action. It's what we can implement. Well, if complexity undermines execution, then to me, the very first step is to untether from the unnecessarily complex, get back to the basics, and focus on the fundamentals. So that's really my guiding light in every area of my life. If my goal is to be a better father and a more connected parent, then I ask myself, well, what are the basic building blocks of being a good father? What are the fundamentals of being a good father? And then how can I work towards improvement in those areas relentlessly during the unseen hours? And I do that for every area. I do that as a speaker. What are the building blocks or the fundamentals of being a good speaker on stage? And I work on those. What are the fundamentals of being physically and mentally healthy and well? I focus on those. So to me, I spend most of my time working on mastery of the basics. And the last thing I'll say is the key word there is working on. I'm not coming from a place of mastery in any of these areas, but I can say with a huge smile that I'm making progress and I'm moving in the right direction. And for the most part, in every single area of my life, I'm a better man today than I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And while I'm far from done, and I'll always be a work in progress and always be under construction, I like the direction that I'm headed. And if I were to come back on your show a year from now, Tyler, I can say with great confidence that I'll be an even better man then than I am today. And it's that journey and it's that pursuit of always becoming that really inspires me.
Let's hold each other accountable to that and hold ourselves accountable to that, as we've phrased, actually, and make sure that happens. Alchemists, welcome to a new episode. Today's guest knows how to simplify success on the court, in the boardroom, and in life. Alan Stein Jr. is a renowned keynote speaker, performance coach, and best-selling author of Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game. With a background in elite basketball performance training, Alan now helps organizations develop impactful leaders, boost team cohesion, and drive measurable results. If you're looking to level up your leadership, this is the guy to listen to. Alan, welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. It's my pleasure to have you on the show today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be with you. I'm excited for a fun chat.
Me as well. And we're going to dive into our first elemental segment, the Earth segment. And here we're going to come and talk about our core values and what we hold true to ourselves in order to do the things that we're doing. So with that being said, let's get into it. Hey, right quick, my one request before we get into our first segment, Alchemists, it would mean everything to me if you head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Growing the channel enables me to bring on incredible guests and continue delivering the best show I can for you. Now, let's get into Grounded Moments.
3, 2, 1.
Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose, Grounded Moments is all about our values. And there's no better way to see what you truly stand for, Alan, than to play a game. So this game is called Principle or Preferences. I am going to give you a scenario and you can reply in one of two ways. It's a principle, something that's core to you, you value, it's something everybody should consider to be important, or it's just a preference, meaning it's okay if it's not held to the same standard every single time for every single person. Make sense?
It does.
All right, let's play principle or preference. Winning every day starts at 5 a.m.
Preference.
Feedback should never be sugar-coated.
Preference.
The team's mindset matters more than its talent.
Principle.
Always finish what you start, even if it's no longer aligned.
Preference.
No phones in meetings, ever.
Preference.
Motivation is unreliable. Discipline only.
Principle.
Daily journaling to stay locked in.
Preference.
Non-negotiable fitness routines.
Principle.
No multitasking, no exceptions.
Preference.
When in doubt, over-communicate.
Principle.
There we go. A quick round of principle or preferences there. We get to learn what we stand for, and we don't get to go back and explain them. No, of course we get to go back and explain them. But I am curious, as a leadership success coach, your self-development coach, what are the top 3 things you look for in team members to tell, okay, they've got the qualities of leadership that we already don't need to train them on?
They'll be the things that most people label as quote unquote soft skills. Earlier when we were talking about emotional connotations and the way we feel about words. And it's always been a little bit of a pet peeve of mine that we call those soft skills because, one, I believe it gives the emotional connotation that they're weak. That at least for me, soft and weak at least swim in the same pool. They're not direct synonyms, but they often mean something very similar. And there's certainly nothing weak about developing the traditional soft skills. The other reason it's not my favorite label or word to use is soft skills are really hard to develop and hard to work on. But the soft skills and things such as character and integrity and authenticity, that's the stuff that I would look for first and foremost. Secondly, I would look for a culture fit. Is this person aligned with what we're trying to do, with what we believe, with how we're going to get there? Do they fit? And then lastly, I would look for the competence in certain technical skills and, do they have what it is that we need? But for me, it really would lean heavily towards the things that are really hard to teach. I don't know that you can teach character. You can certainly model character, and I try and do that in every area of my life, but it's kind of like for those organizations that maybe have a frontline worker that's always interacting with the customers, and they say something to the effect of like, you're required to smile when you greet a customer. It's like, well, I don't know that you can really make smiling a requirement. I think you need to hire someone that is either naturally positive, optimistic, energetic, and chooses to smile, or you hire someone that feels so aligned with what it is that your business is doing that a smile is just a natural byproduct. But I don't think smiling is something that can be required or forced.
Completely agree with you. And I'm curious, if it were not called soft skill, what would you replace that with?
I mean, it sounds a little generic and it sounds a little cheesy. I mean, I would call them life skills because those are the same skills that have such high utility. They really do apply to every area of life. I mean, if we can be talking about a specific business vocation or industry or leadership, but those skills will help you and benefit you and improve your reputation and your credibility really in any area of life. So they have such high utility. So I guess I'd call them life skills.
Yeah, and I've thought about that too, because I agree soft skills has that connotation to it. And I think what they're really trying to say is it's typically not a skill that you can measure with a result in things, but it also is at the same time. It's just an indirect measurement of that result. So it's harder to read the impact that it has when you're just looking at statistical numbers on paper versus actually being present in the room. Now, I'm curious, before coming on the show, I asked you to share a quote with me that we could unpack and talk about. And the response that you put in was ask me it live. And so I'm excited for it. What is a quote or a phrase that you continually bring up either in the workplace or at home that drives you?
Well, this is not an Alan Stein Jr. original, and I don't know who said it first, or I would give them proper attribution, but the quote that I really try and live my life by at present is really the foundation of everything I believe is a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle, that life is not zero sum. And I really, if someone were to ask me at a core level what my purpose is or my why or what it is that I do for a living, I'd say I'm in the business of lighting candles. And of course, I'd say that with a smile, a wink, and most likely some air quotes. But I'm here to light other people's candles and to ignite and to share and to inspire and to educate and to motivate. And anytime I can do those things, it doesn't take anything away from me. In fact, I actually think it's the opposite. I actually think my flame will burn stronger the more candles I can help light and the more I can pour into others. But we often in this world are taught that things are zero sum, and that if I tell you my secrets or I tell you what's working for me, that that's somehow going to weaken my power or weaken my performance. And I just don't believe that.
One of the quotes that I always bring back on the show was said at one of my very early on episodes. His name's Jethro Jones, also known as the transformative principle. The quote he brought on was, well, the people at the bottom are fighting, the people at the top are too busy collaborating and working together for success to figure things out. And so lighting each other's candles resonates and correlates very heavily to that phrase as well. Now, with that though, there's situations where you simply don't want to light someone else's candle because you might not believe in what they're going with, or maybe you simply don't have your own personal time to do that. With being driven by this, how do you find that balance towards what you should also say no to lighting a candle for?
Well, but before I answer, let me preface this with almost every single thing that I share on stage or on page today, I did the opposite of 15, 20, or 30 years ago. You know, one of the big principles I talk about is holding myself accountable and not blaming, complaining, or making excuses. And while I adamantly believe that today, had you known me 20 years ago, Tyler, I was the king of blaming, complaining, and making excuses. And the reason I say that is I'm almost 50 years old, and I haven't always been trying to light other people's candles for 50 years. In fact, if you'd known me 20 years ago, while I was still in the space of teaching and coaching and pouring into others, I had some deep-rooted insecurities, and I had some selfish tendencies, and there were plenty of times where I intentionally chose not to light someone else's candle because I was fearful or scared or insecure that it would lessen mine. So some of these have just come about through life experience, through maturity, hopefully through some newfound wisdom. But for me, now, yeah, I mean, I always believe in pouring into others. You know, another quote that's kind of an offshoot of that is, I believe a compliment unshared is an act of selfishness. You know, if I have something nice to say to you and I choose not to say it, that's an act of selfishness, because, you know, I have no idea that what I share to you, even if it may be trivial, you know, prior to us hitting record, I told you how much I liked your backdrop and the lighting and your professional setup in your studio. I didn't need to say any of that, but I chose to because it popped into my mind. And I figure, why would I deprive you of that compliment if it's something that I'm thinking? And the other thing is, I don't know what's going on in your world or in your life. And that compliment from me in that moment could really be a spark for you. It could be something that you really needed at that moment. So to me, I can't think of an instance at present where I'm not going to do my best to light someone else's candle. Now, of course, we can find exceptions to that. If somebody's plotting to do something unjust or inherently evil, yeah, I'm not going to fan their flame and pour into that. But those are just rare exceptions. But generally speaking, I can't think of a reason that I shouldn't try to pour into another human being. And let's also keep in mind that, to me, pouring into another human being, as simple as seeing a stranger on an elevator for 10 seconds and giving them a smile and saying good morning. I mean, everything doesn't have to be this grand gesture, but it's, can I leave every interaction or every physical situation I'm in, can I leave it just a little bit better than I found it? And that's another one of my guiding principles that's kind of an offshoot of the lighting candles.
So many things we'll get into there, and absolutely, you know, the first one for the alchemists listening, you should go watch, because, you know, Alan has an equally great background, and before we started, any time that two people that care a lot about what their backgrounds look like, they'll spend some time chatting about what they're doing and where it's going, and so it's always good to hear. And what he doesn't know is that I got a new light in the background yesterday and spent 4 hours trying to figure out the right settings on my camera to make everything pop a little bit more. And so to hear the payoff, it was definitely a nice surprise to hear on my end. But the second one is, you actually just made a statement that said it's another one of your core principles that you stand by. So I'm curious, how long is this list of principles that you have? And can you share what it is that you do stand by?
Well, my core values, when I try to keep things as concise and as tight as possible, I mean, I have 5 core values: respect, authenticity, integrity, generosity, and consistency. Those are kind of the 5 pillars that are my core values that I use to make all of the important decisions in my life, and that I use as a filter for everything that I do. But offshoots of those are kind of these short, I guess we could call them tweetable phrases or principles that I try to live by, such as a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. A compliment unshared is an act of selfishness. Leave everyone and every place you go better than you found it. Those really combine principles such as respect and generosity and consistency and those things. So those are definitely principles that I try to live by, which is why I really enjoyed the principles or preferences segment. And if you noticed on a couple of those, I had to pause for a moment. I had to give some thought, which is why it was such a fun game and such a fun exercise.
Now, I'm curious, if you were pushed and said you can only have 3, what 3 would you go to?
As far as my core values,
Yeah.
I'll go with respect, number 1. That's kind of the foundation. And respect is very multifaceted. I respect myself. I respect my health and my wellness. I respect the future person I'm trying to be. I respect others and their opinions and their beliefs. I respect the environment. I respect authority. I respect a variety of different things. But I also believe in being a respectful human being, and I try and give everyone respect. I don't believe anyone needs to earn respect. That should be given. Now, there'll be times where respect can be withheld, and you may do something that does not deserve or demand my respect, but I believe in giving everyone the benefit of the doubt initially. I would say my second one would be generosity, and many times when people hear the word generosity, or at least I did for most of my life, we kind of think in financial terms, someone that gives a lot of money. But you can be generous with your energy, generous with your time, generous with your words, generous with your spirit. Certainly you can be generous financially, but it goes back to that core belief of lighting other people's candles. And then I would say if I had to pick a third one, I'll go with consistency. I believe consistency is actually a superpower. I believe that consistency is the driver behind all of the other traits that allow us to not only perform and produce at a high level, but that allow us to be fulfilled. And really you could, working hard, well, you got to work hard consistently. Working smart, well, you got to work smart consistently. Discipline. Well, if you only make disciplined decisions every other Tuesday, you're not going to get very far. You have to make disciplined decisions as consistently as possible. So to me, consistency is the foundation to which all of those other traits are built, because none of them done in isolation or none of them done sporadically will actually yield much benefit. So if I had to narrow it down to 3, those would be my 3.
I appreciate the tough task of having to pick 2 to wean out of there. Now, coming back to your quote of wanting to light other candles and the message we've just talked about for the past 25 minutes here, I'm hoping we can condense this into kind of an elevator pitch to the audience, or almost like an infomercial style, as to why this message is so important. So I'm curious, are you willing to give it your best go at an elevator pitch?
I'm always willing to give everything my best go.
All right, so whenever you're ready, in about 15 to 20 seconds, I want you to pitch this message as to why lighting other people's candles is so important.
I believe that the core of not only high performance and fulfillment, but the core of confidence, the core of optimism, the core of most of the things that most people covet in life are outside of ourselves, that we truly get the most satisfaction and fulfillment when we are pouring into others and we are lighting other people's candles. So while we're doing it in service of others, it also gives us a real high and a sense of satisfaction that, at least for me, is unparalleled.
And, with the things that we want to push out to others, sometimes we need people to try to relight our candles too and relight those flames. And we start to talk about the setbacks we might have or the adversity we face. And physically on your arm, we can see some adversity that you faced, but there's so many other things that happen that we have no idea that goes about. And so we're going to segue from our earth element on talking about values to the air element, which talks about the winds that slow us down or give us some lift or push us from behind. And we're going to move into headwinds and tailwinds. Here we get down to the mistakes we've made and what was in the aftermath to learn. And to get into the comfort zone of mistakes, Alan, it's another element, so we are going to play yet another game. And this game is called Adversity Mad Libs. I'm going to ask you to fill in some blanks for me. They can be the honest truth, totally unhinged and made up, but the idea is we're gonna fill these up and see where we go. Are you ready to try?
I sure am. Let's do it.
All right, and after I read the sentence that I want you to complete for me, I'll flash it up on the screen for you as well. So the first one is: the moment I almost burned out came after blank, and I had to blank to recover.
The moment I almost burned out came after a speaking engagement in Germany where I was speaking to a group of coaches, basketball coaches, and realized at that moment that I was experiencing some significant burnout. And as soon as I came back to the States, I decided to make a career change. And that's when I left the basketball training space to become a corporate keynote speaker.
I once coached someone who blank, and it taught me more than any book ever could.
I once coached someone, boy, this is tough. It's hard to fill these in with one letter. I mean, I've had such a vast coaching background. What I'll say is I've coached several players that have had bad attitudes, that have been inherently selfish, and I coached them with very high empathy and compassion because there were times in my playing career that I also had a very bad attitude and was inherently selfish. And I'm actually glad that I was able to go through that journey because I think it's made me a better coach today because I have nothing but empathy and compassion for those folks.
I appreciate that message so much. And yeah, definitely putting you on the spot with some of these blanks here.
Oh no, this is great. Yeah, I don't mind a bit. This is awesome.
I've got 3 more for you here. I bombed a talk once because blank. I'll never forget that lesson.
I don't know that I've ever bombed a talk, but I know that I've given talks that didn't resonate with that audience. And I certainly felt shook while I was on stage. You know, one of the things that I've learned over an almost decade-long speaking career now is not to judge an audience based on how they appear to be receiving the information. That there are certain industries, there are certain types of people, there's certain groups that you can speak to, and they have a very stoic, almost stone-faced approach, that they can be sitting there with their arms crossed and not smiling for 60 minutes. And the younger version of me, or the inexperienced version of me, would be worried that the talk's not landing, that they don't like it, that they don't like me, and then that insecurity would show through, and actually I would not give the talk that I was capable of. What I've since learned is everyone processes information differently. There have been times where I've spoken to an audience that appeared very stoic and stone-faced. They didn't laugh at my jokes, a very tepid applause, and then at the end, there's a line of people coming up to me telling me how much that talk impacted them and how excited they are to share some of these things with their spouse or with their children. And it's this epiphanal moment of, well, boy, you sure didn't look like you were enjoying it, but I'm glad to know that you did. So one of the biggest lessons I've learned that I think prevents me from bombing on stage is never to judge an audience by how they're reacting.
Now, before I get into the next one, I hear that story.
And I realize also I'm really bad at this game. I know that I'm not filling
No, you're great. It's awesome.
I'm not filling in the blanks the way that you're asking them.
You've sparked a question for me that I want to get into before I do any more of this game. Which,
Okay.
in that moment, that room you're in, and this will be a bit bolder, but I'm going to say those people in the room that approach you after, that are quiet during your session, early on when they made you feel insecure maybe about what you were doing, they were projecting their own insecurity onto you while you were up on that stage. And not only that, I would question that they're projecting their workplace culture, right? Because if you're giving a talk in front of people who at the end all want to come up and talk to you, but yet during it they felt so suppressed to not do anything. And maybe you were in a room of, and I don't know how big the room was, but maybe you were in a room of 50 to 100 people that all just very like to intently and heavily listen. I would question that though and say, what environment are they in every day that leads them to believe that that's what they have to do? I'm curious if you agree with that statement.
I do. And I realize, here's what I've come to learn. As human beings, on some level, we crave certainty. We do the best we can to try to predict a hypothetical future that we feel gives us a sense of certainty. So what we do when there's something that's unknown and that makes us feel uncomfortable is we usually, as you just said so brilliantly, project or insert a narrative or a story behind why someone is doing that. And I've come to learn that when we're dealing with other human beings, unless they were to blatantly tell us, we never know what's going on in someone else's life or in their day or what's going on in their head. And it's pretty futile to try to fill in the blank. So for example, when I'm standing on stage and you're sitting in the front row and you appear very stoic and stone-faced and arms are crossed, the older me would I would tell myself a story. Tyler doesn't like me. Tyler's not finding this helpful. Tyler wishes he wasn't here right now. And that's really futile because I don't know if that's true. That could be true, but there could also be 1,000 other reasons for the way you're behaving that way. First of all, it could be 8 a.m. in Las Vegas on the 5th day of a 5-day conference, and you are literally just exhausted and depleted. You've got nothing left to give. So the way you're behaving right now has nothing to do with me or my message. Your tank is empty. For all I know, you were up all night with a sick child, or that you got a call this morning that a loved one had to be rushed to the hospital, and like there could be a variety of things that are affecting the way that you're coming up and you're coming off and showing up in the world. So I have to do my very best not to tell myself, those narratives. I'll give you an example that literally happened last week. Last week, I was speaking in Seattle at an event for Microsoft, and I was doing a couple of breakout sessions. And I thought the session was going phenomenally well. And about midway through one of my sessions, in about a 3-minute period, I didn't do a head count, but I don't know, 10 or 12 people got up and left. Now, in a room full of 150, that's kind of noticeable. That's roughly 10% of people kind of got up and left. And I remember in the moment, there was a moment where I started to go down the old path and say, oh my gosh, am I doing something wrong? These people aren't liking this. They're not digging the message. Oh gosh. And then I caught myself because I have the awareness now, and I just smiled and took a deep breath and reminded myself, I have no idea why those people are leaving. So it doesn't do me any good to fill that in with a narrative that doesn't serve me. For all I know, those 10 people all work in the same department, and they had scheduled a Zoom meeting with some other colleagues at that exact same time, and they had no choice but to leave. So any of those things could be true, but it does not help me or does not serve me to fill in the blanks of uncertainty with a narrative that's going to undermine me. So for me, that's where I've gotten so much better. So I've learned now that when an audience is rather stoic, or if a couple people get up and leave, I smile, I take a deep breath, and I lean in even harder to do the best I can to serve the people that are still in that audience. And knowing good and well, I may never know the reason those people are behaving that way, and that's okay. I'm getting much better at being okay with the unknown.
And as a sports guy, there's always people that leave to beat the rush and miss the best parts of the game and potentially the longest parts of the game too. So I totally agree with that statement that you gave, and I just wanted to see where it was coming from there. Let's jump into the next one though here. Sure. The hardest mindset shift I've ever made was going from blank to blank.
This one I can do exactly as you laid it out. Thank you. The hardest mindset shift I've ever made was going from a scarcity mindset to an abundant mindset.
I appreciate that, and we'll unpack that one as we go through. And I've got one more for us here first, though, and I think you can do this one too. If I hadn't failed at blank, I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, you'd think I'd be able to fill that in naturally. Let me explain. There haven't been too many things that I failed at in my life, and it's not because of exceptional performance. It's because for most of my life, I was so scared and so insecure that I played it safe, that I didn't aim high enough, that I set the bar so low that I was almost guaranteed to be successful and check the box because I didn't push myself. And that's another mindset that I've really tried to shift, is try to untether from these limiting beliefs and aim much higher. So now, at present, I fail fairly often because I set really lofty goals and I have incredibly high standards. But I'm okay with falling short of a goal that really stretches me and pushes me, whereas my previous self just didn't aim high enough to fail very often. And the other part to that I'll say is, we've talked at length now about words and their connotations. And I really don't even use the word failure very much in my current terminology. I look at everything as a setback or a speed bump or a learning opportunity. So if I set a goal for my speaking business for calendar year of 2025, a number of speaking engagements and a certain revenue goal, if I fall short of that, which I have done the last couple of years, I don't view that as a failure. I view that as I fell a little bit short. It's a minor setback. Let's lift up the hood and tinker around a little bit, and let's figure what I can learn from this so that next year, maybe I'll get closer to hitting or exceeding that goal. In case in point, 2 years ago, I set a very lofty goal for number of events to do in a year and revenue goal. And I fell short by 20%, which is fairly significant. However, that same year doubled my previous best year of my career. So yeah, I fell short of a goal, but it was 100% better than any year I'd had previously, which is why I'm very careful about labeling things as a failure. To say that I doubled my revenue goal in a single year, there's no way I would ever label that as a failure, even though I fell short of the goal that I had intended.
What a great mindset to put out there. And you know what? The game is designed to spark heavy conversation. And so I so very much appreciate it. You're one of the first guests that have played this game. I think it's recently changed from a different game I used to play. I value this one a lot more because usually what happens is after it, I can come back and return to that conversation and start to dive into why did you answer that and where did we go here?
Yeah.
With you, we got right into it for every single time. And so what the game ended up becoming was this incredible conversation around how you handle adversity and how you view adversity and how you view setbacks and how to, the only thing that I don't think we got to was how do you overcome some of your biggest setbacks?
Well, I think all of that was a very nice way of you saying that I suck at Mad Libs. However, we still got something out of and benefited from the exercise. And I really love how creative and innovative you are. This is not hyperbole. I have done over 400 podcast interviews in the last 10 years. And this is without question one of the most original and unique and creative and fun experiences I've had. So even though I've sucked at some of the things you've asked, I'm having an absolute blast.
I appreciate that.
Well, as far as overcoming, it really comes down to curiosity and fascination. It comes down to self-belief, and it comes down to what we just talked about, not looking at something as a permanent failure, but is saying, all right, I had this hypothesis, I had this goal, I had something I was going to go after, didn't quite work out the way that I had thought, didn't quite meet my preferences, so what can I learn from this? This is when I put on my curious hat. And go, okay, man, let's go into problem solving mode. Let me figure out, why did I fall 20% short? What are some things I could have done differently? The most important question I ask myself, and the first question I ask myself, anytime I don't reach a goal, or anytime things don't work out the way I want, or anytime my preferences aren't met, the very first question I ask is, how was I complicit in this? How was I complicit in not getting what I wanted? What role did I play in not reaching my goal? And the reason I say that is the speaking industry in particular, there are certainly some external factors that play a role in whether or not people hire speakers. And some of those have to do with economic conditions, and some of those have to do with whether it's an election year or not. Some of those have to do, like the pandemic obviously upended the entire speaking industry. So there are some external factors that play a role, and to ignore those would be foolish. However, when I sat down to ask, why did I fall short of my goal? I didn't blame, complain, or make excuses about any of the external factors. I only looked internally, or looked in the mirror and said, what could I have done differently? Could I have implemented a different social media content strategy? Could I have had a different process for forging and connecting and following up with clients or certain relationships? And everything I did was ask myself what I could do differently. And then that's the list that I would focus on moving forward. So for me, when it comes to overcoming setbacks or speed bumps or failures, I hold myself to a very high standard. And to take a page out of Jocko Willink's book, literally, I hold myself to a very high level of extreme ownership. And that I understand that external circumstances and events and what people say and what people do and market conditions, all of those things will have an effect. but I get to choose my response to all of those things, and my response will ultimately dictate whether or not I move forward. So I don't worry about the external. I put all of my focus on the internal and how I choose to respond to certain things.
And a few years ago, I used to be so bad at focusing on the external because it was the easiest thing to focus on. And, we go down to our early conversation here where it was easy to blame. It was easy to formulate what happened. Now I ask myself, what could I do to add consistency, or where can I add consistency to these actions? And that usually helps me reframe my mindset from what went wrong or what was the failure, the setback, or the mistake to what can I improve. And if it's a path of growth and we're focusing on continuous growth, that's why we always set those new goals every year on what we want to do. That's when you start to move your bar, right? Because there's a difference between complacency and overdriven competence, I would say. And what we want is we want people to continue to move their own bar by their own will. And that's only going to happen if we have the mindset that you just talked about. With that, we talk about adversity we face, and we've hinted at the changes we put forward. We're going to segue here from our air element and talking about the adversity to the water element, which is the fluid changes we put in around when adversity faces to move that needle a little bit forward. Small shifts, big waves. In Ripples of Change, we discover how to make a lasting impact. And Alan, this game is designed to take as long as you want it to take. So there is no wrong, failed way, setback to play this one. This is called Quick Tips. I'm just going to answer a question. And this might be the hard part, is that in one sentence or two, I want you to address the question. Okay?
I'll see if I can mess this up somewhere. I got you, brother.
What's one mental rep every leader should do daily?
Ask themselves the role that they're playing in their current performance.
What separates high performers from almost high performers?
Consistency, discipline, and love for the fundamentals.
What's your go-to move when your confidence gets shaken?
Take a step back, take a deep breath, and remind myself of previous experiences and demonstrated performances where I know that I was good enough. Remind myself of my competence.
What's a success principle you teach that most people ignore?
It's important to earn your confidence, but blend it with humility.
And what's one non-negotiable from your basketball coaching days that you still live by?
Never get bored with the basics.
Hey, that was quick tips, and almost too quick because I want to go back and hear the stories about where all these answers come from and stem from.
Let's do it.
The first thing I want to know is when you have to make a change, what steps do you take?
Well, if we're going to look at change primarily through the lens of changing a habit or changing a behavior or changing a mindset, there's a three-step formula that I learned about a decade ago that has been unbelievably effective, not only for me, but the thousands of people I've had a chance to work with. And the three steps are as follows. Step number one is to pick one singular trait that you're trying to change, or one behavior, one habit, one mindset, but only pick one. I'm a self-diagnosed quote nerd. I've loved quotes for my entire life. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you chase two rabbits, they both get away. So instead, you got to figure out the one that you're going to go after and go grab that sucker by the tail. So pick one thing that you're going to change. Don't try to change 7 things at once. It's one of the primary reasons that New Year's resolutions don't work, is because most people say at the strike of midnight on January 1st, I'm going to change these 5 things and become the best version of myself. And within 2 to 3 weeks, they ain't doing none of those things. So we want to have very singular focus. The second thing we need to do is we need to make a personal commitment to doing that thing for the next 66 days. Now, I've read tons of research, and generally speaking, most of the research says it takes around days to change the average habit or behavior. There's nothing magical about that. It can be plus or minus depending on the human being, depending on the habit trying to change, whatever. I just like 66 because it's memorable. I like it because it's a little bit of a stretch. To do something every day for 66 straight days is pretty challenging for most people, but it's also doable. If I told you you had to do something for the next 6.5 years, you'd probably be intimidated before you even started. So to me, I'm going to pick one thing. I'm going to make a commitment to doing it for the next 66 days. And then the third step is we want to go back to where this conversation started, talking about accountability. And I want to keep the light of accountability on me, which means I'm going to recruit my inner circle or my board of directors, if you will. And I'm going to ask a handful of people that are closest to me, that I know love me, that want to see me happy and high performing. And I'm going to ask them to hold me accountable to doing that one thing for the next 66 days. And research has proven that if you keep singular focus, you make the commitment to doing it for that short sprint of 66 days, and people you truly care about are going to check in with you every single day to make sure you did that thing, there's a very good chance that will become a new habit or a new behavior or a new mindset. And then the beautiful part is, because we are always becoming and we're all works in progress, at the end of that 66 days, now you do another habit, or you stack another behavior, or you try another mindset, so that we're constantly leveling up. So the cool part is, if 66 days is, roughly 2 months, well, that means over the course of a year, we can change 5 or 6 behaviors. So those 5 or 6 things that we planned on changing on day one, we're going to eventually make those changes over the course of the year, but we're just going to do them one at a time. And we're going to do them in a way that's going to ensure that they stick, instead of trying to do them all at once.
That's why when you pay for like a professional program, whether it's a gym coach or somebody to come in and talk to your leadership team and try to improve things, you're not paying necessarily for the product, because most of the products with the use of AI, you can go and find almost as good as a product, maybe not in the specific twist that it's delivered and implemented, but you can get really, really close. You pay for the person to show up for you daily when you need them, right? And that's where the money lies in those positions, is you become somebody that's always showing up for people. And just as you said, right, it's 66 days. 2 weeks sounds unrealistic. It's not going to be achieved. Anything longer sounds like it's too long to even bother starting. It's almost the perfect number to jump in at and know that, okay, I can do this for this long, but also if I'm paying for something or I'm involved in something, there's this community that can sustain it for that time as well. And it's that group that you surround yourself with that pushes it forward. So when we decide that a change needs to be made, and we're sitting here going, okay, we know that it's going to take about 66 days to do this. This is what we're going to do. How do we communicate that, either with ourselves if it's an internal change, or with the group around us if it's an external change or a change within an organization, that this is what we need to do moving forward?
Well, first of all, I don't want to gloss over that you said something very important and insightful there, and that is when we become aware that a change needs to be made. That's always the first step. Awareness is always the first step. And the reason I know that to be true is you're never going to improve something you're unaware of. You're never going to fix something you're oblivious to. And I say that because that in and of itself should be celebrated. Once you are aware of something that was a previous blind spot and say, oh my gosh, this is absolutely something I need to change, is the fundamental first step, and that should be celebrated. Then you can move into the 3 steps that I just shared. But I also believe in very open and direct communication. So I believe in, and don't make anything any more complicated than it needs to be. Once you've decided this thing that you're going to commit to change, and the reason you've decided it is because you've also given some thought to, now that I'm aware of the problem, what's at risk if this doesn't change? Now that I'm aware that I have this behavior or this habit or this mindset that's undermining my ability to be my best self, what's truly at risk if I don't make the change? And sit with that and internalize that. And usually what's at risk if you don't make the change will give you the motivation to at least get started. I am a big believer that discipline trumps motivation, that motivation is a feeling, and like all feelings, motivation will ebb and flow. Also recognize that having a sense of motivation, at least as a spark in the beginning, is what can create the momentum to which discipline will then take over. But if you're aware of something that needs to be changed, you sit with it long enough to realize what's really at risk in your life if you don't make the change. That will spark some motivation to start with those 66 days. And then you reach out to the folks that you know care about you, and don't make that conversation any more complex than it needs to be. Just say, this is what I intend to do for the next 66 days. This is why I intend to do it. And I really need your help in making sure that I follow through. I'm a human being. I'm flawed. I'm fallible. I know that on day 13, I'm not going to feel like doing this thing. And I'm asking you to hold me to the fire and hold me accountable to make sure that I see this through. And if I were to fall off, which I'm willing to bet almost everyone will at some point because we're human, don't expect to get 66 perfect days in a row. Expect that on one of those days you're going to fall off. And when you do, give yourself some grace and compassion to be human and try not to miss 2 in a row. If you do fall off the wagon on day 13, give yourself some space and grace to be human. Don't be overly critical. Don't beat yourself up. Don't tell yourself that you suck. Instead, get right back on it on day 14 and continue to get those people to hold you accountable.
Absolutely. And, day 13, like I'm losing motivation day 4.
Absolutely.
You're so right to that. If you can get 66, it's not 66 perfect days. It's 66 days. And it's how you get to those 66 to see where you could go from where you started. Now, with the changes that we're implementing, we start to talk about the decisions we action. And that's going to bring us from our water element, where we're talking about the change that we recognize, to the fire element, which talks about the decisions we then have to make in action to see that change through. So we're going to get into our final segment here on spark or burn. Alchemists, before we get into our spark or burn segment, as much as I shared earlier that it means the world to me if you go and support my channel, it means just as much if you go and support Alan's. We both work so hard to grow and create impact in what we're doing. And the more that we can gain a following, a like, a share, a view time on anything that we put online, the bigger it helps our reach. So if you've made it this far into the episode, pause for 5 seconds, head over to one of Alan's channels, which are linked in the description of this show, and give him a subscription or a follow. Send him a like or a comment. That just lets him know you appreciate what we're talking about here today. Let's get into Spark or Burn. In Spark or Burn, we face the flames that either spark success or burn some lessons into our memory. And we are going to kick off with our final game. And this one, there's no room for deviation because it's called Final Answer. And in this one, it's a would you rather. So I'm going to read a would you rather statement, and you just have to let me know which one would you pick.
I think I can do that.
All right, here we go. Would you rather lead a team with raw talent but low discipline, or low talent but elite habits?
Low talent, elite habits.
Would you rather win once big or consistently finish top 3 forever?
Consistently finish top 3 forever.
Would you rather teach mindset to athletes or to executives?
Executives.
Would you rather hit the stage unprepared or overprepared but be emotionally off?
Overprepared.
Would you rather, fair enough, would you rather master the fundamentals or innovate every month?
Master the fundamentals.
Would you rather lose momentum or lose clarity?
Momentum.
Would you rather miss a workout or miss a meeting?
A meeting.
Would you rather hear hard truth or motivational fluff?
I'd rather hear a hard truth.
Would you rather be remembered as a coach or as a catalyst?
A catalyst.
And would you rather chase greatness or sustain it?
Sustain it.
I'm curious, Alan, what's the hardest decision you feel like you've ever had to make?
Singular decision. Nothing's jumping out as a singular decision. I mean, some of these, we said a word earlier, momentum. I was building up some really good momentum in my basketball training career. At the same time, I started to experience burnout. When we did that first Mad Libs and I was telling you about being in Germany and that was a truth. It was definitely a difficult decision to leave an industry that I had poured myself into for 15 years, had achieved and built up some status and some reputation, had gotten to a level that a lot of people were envious of, and to leave that completely to start something new and to pivot in a completely different direction wasn't necessarily a singular decision, but more of a process and a system of decisions. But that was certainly something that was very challenging to do.
Now, earlier in the show, we talked about your goal of being a candle lighter and wanting to light people's candles. And this often leads to, also helping with decisions and decisions you have to make. When you're stuck between two options, how do you choose which one to action?
My first filter always goes back to my core values. Every single decision I make in my life, I run through the filter of, is this in alignment with my core values or not? Is this in alignment with what I say I believe? And if the answer is yes, then I usually do that thing immediately. If the answer is no, if what I'm about to say or do is not in alignment with my core values or what I say I believe, then I do my best to pause and take a breath and take a beat and have the conscious awareness in the moment to ask myself, do I really want to proceed in saying or doing something that's not in alignment with my core values? And while I'm not batting 1,000, I'm not getting straight A's, and I'm not perfect, more times than not, when I have the awareness to take that pause, I usually course correct and make a better decision. I usually make a decision that my future self will be grateful for and appreciate. The second level filter that I use is I'm pretty crystal clear on the man I want to be 20 years from now. I'll be turning 50 this coming January, so I'm crystal clear on who I want the 70-year-old Alan to be. So every single decision I make in my life, large or small, personal or professional, individual or organizational, I ask myself, does making this decision take me a little closer to becoming that version of Alan, or does it take me further away? And then my goal every day of my life is to make as many decisions as possible that are in alignment with my core values and alignment with the man I'm trying to become. And I don't have a fixed percentage on it, but if most of the decisions I make, most of the days of my life are in alignment with my core values and alignment with the person I'm trying to become, then I have full optimism and confidence that things will work out and that I'll be living my best life.
The largest theme in the show that I've put together, which is done very intentionally, by the way, is by the time we get to the fire element, the conversation actually comes back to the earth element, and we talk about those things that we valued. And it's the idea that the elements have to work together to build a whole system. And so what you did there was you actually summed up my last segment perfectly. And it's always my quickest segment, because it comes back to how do your values show up in your decision-making process. Now, my last question in our fire segment here is, how do we get people to understand the importance of values in decision-making?
Well, it all starts with clarity. You can't use that as a filter of your non-negotiables to make decisions if you aren't even clear on what you believe. So the very first step, which is why I believe you started with it, is you've got to get clear on what you believe. And it's going to be different for everyone. I'm a very linear thinker. I'm not an incredibly creative person. So for me, core values is easy for me just to name 5 singular words that strongly resonate with me. And it's easy for me because I'm a quote nerd. I have some quotes like a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle as kind of my guidepost. That's just the way I think, so that works best for me. I'm not implying that that's what everyone else needs to do. I don't think everyone walking the earth needs to be able to recite 3 to 5 core values with one word, when they're at a cocktail party. But you have to have some type of internal compass of understanding what you believe in. What are going to be the guideposts that you use to make the most important decisions in your life? Beautiful part is when you get crystal clear on what you believe, when you're crystal clear on what you stand for, when you're crystal clear on the person you're striving to become, it actually makes decision making a much more fluid process. Now, it doesn't mean you won't still have really hard decisions to make. That's the price tag of being a human being. But it means now you'll have a more fluid process because you can take the guesswork out of it. You don't have to negotiate with yourself all of the time. I'm going to be kind to every person I come in contact with today, and I don't have to negotiate every single situation. And the reason I'm going to be kind to everyone is because that is one of my firmest core values and deepest beliefs. So Nick Saban, the former football coach, Hall of Fame football coach at Alabama, has this saying about, it takes what it takes. And he would always say that if you want to be an elite level All-American player at Alabama, you actually don't have very many decisions to make in a given day. You don't have near as many decisions to make as a normal student at Alabama because most of those decisions have already been made in advance because of your commitment to being an elite football player. So on Friday night, you don't have to negotiate with yourself on whether or not you're going to go to a party or whether or not you're going to drink. Those questions don't even get asked because you already know the answer is no if your goal is to commit to being the best football player you can be. So to me, it all circles back to this simplify success. Most of the questions people have to ask themselves every moment of every single day I don't even have to ask myself because I've already pre-committed to these core values and the person I'm trying to become.
And everybody is going to think you're crazy for it, and everybody's going to have an opinion for it. And everybody needs to focus on themselves a little bit more before they can put that judgment onto other people too. So I so appreciate that answer. Alan, one of the things that I've started that's not yet made it live onto any of the shows, well, I guess by the time this one goes live and people hear this, it would have actually happened. So this is a new segment, though. To wrap everything up, I've asked the previous guest that I've interviewed to ask a question for the next guest coming on, where they have no idea who they are, what they're bringing to the table. And the last person that I interviewed was Mimi Nicklin. And Mimi is an empathy pathway leader who she's ranked in Malaysia for her level of reach and growth around leadership, I think specifically on LinkedIn. And the question that she wanted to leave for my next guest is, in a world of AI, what human skill sets hold the potential to change our world?
Well, it's funny you said she's an empath. I would say empathy and compassion, which I know are not direct synonyms, but I believe empathy and compassion are kind of sisters of each other and often go hand in hand. And it's funny that early in our conversation, we talked about the soft skills, which we've now relabeled life skills. And while AI is not going anywhere, it's only going to become a more prominent fixture in our daily lives. I do believe that we'll see an increase in the need for these life skills, an increase in the need for leadership, for human-to-human interaction and communication, for empathy, for compassion, for things that at least at present would be very difficult for AI to utilize or to mimic. So that's why I'm not opposed to AI by any means. I mean, certainly there are some pitfalls and some dangers that could arise from it, but generally speaking, I've spent my entire life working on a set of skills that I believe are actually going to become more valuable with the rise of AI. So I'm liking where I'm sitting at present.
Great answer. And where I'm going next with it is, what question would you like to leave the next guest? Again, not knowing who they are, what they bring to the table, when I'm going to meet with them. I should preface that. It can be absolutely anything.
If you lost everything material in your life right now, your home, your clothes, your bank accounts, everything material, what would be the first thing you'd do? Or first thing you'd do to rebuild your life?
Everything material. What would be?
So you didn't lose your relationships, you didn't lose your health.
Yeah.
You lost the material items.
Yeah. Okay. If you lost everything material in your life right now, your home, your clothes, your bank accounts, everything material, what would be the first thing you do to build your life? Okay. We'll see what they answer. And if you're curious, you got to tune in and check it out. How can people, Alan, get a hold of you if they want to hear you speak or connect and share a story?
Well, I just want to say again how much I enjoyed this. I cannot thank you enough for your innovative, unique, and creative approach. This was a lot of fun. I actually liked feeling somewhat uncomfortable playing some of these games because I'm a big believer that growth happens in those spaces of discomfort. So instead of just asking me the same questions that everybody else asks, I actually liked squirming a little bit and had a lot of fun. This was really enjoyable. I am very easy to find and very accessible and very responsive online and on social media. My website, which is the hub of everything I do, is just alansteinjr.com. My YouTube channel is just youtube.com/Alan Stein Jr. And I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on all of the major social platforms. So shoot me a DM if anyone has a question, wants to share a story, or wants to keep the conversation going. Always my pleasure to interact and really love the engagement portion of social media.
And Alchemists, everything for Alan Stein Jr. will be in the description of this episode. So make sure that you at least check out one of them and you give him that like, that subscription, or that follow. And if you're feeling bold, leave a comment on his most recent post when you click on this. Let him know what you thought of the episode he had with me. Alan, what is the final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Everything that you and I talked about today and everything that I shared, even though there are principles and core values that I hold near and dear to my heart, I'm by no means implying that this is the right way or the best way, or that anyone watching or listening should adopt what it is that I do. I believe each and every one of us needs to define what success means to us, needs to define what we would consider to be a high-performing, fulfilling life, needs to define our own core values and beliefs, needs to define who it is we're trying to become, And I simply wanted to give you a peek behind the curtain and share those thoughts and preferences and principles in my life. But I'm not here to tell anyone how they should live, how they should behave, what they should do, or what's right or wrong. That's for each and every one to decide on their own.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to me, Tyler@elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparks something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same same place.